Hello, my name is Ariel, and we are going to be talking about the Annie Dookhan case. Where did it go wrong? This is my final presentation for Forensics 525 for the summer semester. The 6 botch standards that I have come up with include personnel qualifications, facility and environmental conditions, sampling, testimony review / ensuring the validity of results, non-conforming work, and the control of data and information management. Starting with personnel qualifications, Annie Dookhan lied about obtaining a master's degree from UMass in chemistry, and the Hinton lab failed to cross-check qualifications upon hire to see if she actually had obtained this master's degree. This evidence was brought to light and created issues when she falsely testified that she had a master's degree under oath and misled jurors in numerous drug cases where she tested the samples for the case, and thus this led to many cases being overturned. As you can see, this is section 6.2. The one I have in bold is the laboratory shall ensure that the personnel have the competence to perform laboratory activities for which they are responsible and to evaluate the significance of deviations. So this section was going over the personnel qualifications, and the lab that she worked for failed to cross-check to even see if she had a master's degree in chemistry, which was probably required at the time that she applied for the job. Facility and environmental conditions. So in 2013, when the new investigators started looking into the Hinton lab processes, there were photos presented to these investigators that showed the lab in disarray and just a mess all around. Things like having evidence out of the proper storage lockers and just in plastic bags, or random unmarked pills found in desk drawers, all found during this new investigation into the Hinton lab, even after Dookhan was no longer working there. So it must have happened while she was still there as well. This is a failure to keep conditions suitable, and the sloppiness could invalidate results of tests, and most likely was what led to the carelessness of how they handled Annie Dookhan. All of these 6.3 subsections of facilities and the environmental conditions shall be suitable for the laboratory activities, the requirements for facilities and environmental conditions necessary for performance, and the lab being able to monitor and control and record the environmental conditions in accordance. So they just failed to properly record or even keep in check that this was happening, and the sloppiness could have eventually led to a question of the validity of the results. Sampling. Annie Dookhan notoriously would dry lab her test samples, where she would just identify the drug she was testing, basically just by looking at the sample and using her knowledge from previous tests to identify what she thought the sample was. This obviously was a huge ISO regulation failure, as every sample that comes into the lab for testing needs to be properly tested, regardless of if she thinks she has the idea in her mind. This is what eventually led her to being able to have a mass amount of testing numbers. She was doing thousands of more tests over her coworkers, and this is why she was just kind of guessing at what she thought the sample was. And this obviously is a regulation failure, as every sample that comes into the lab needs to be tested. The 7.3.2 sampling method shall include and describe the selection of the samples or sites, the sampling plan, and the preparation and treatment. So this is just obviously a failure in the regulation to ISO standards in terms of sampling. Testimony review and ensuring the validity of results. Even after all the suspicions surrounding Annie Dookhan and her high throughput testing methods, there were many times where during the dry labbing, these samples would be retested by other people and found not to match what Dookhan had originally found it to be. So she would contaminate the samples so that it matched her original results. No one was ever there to see her do this, thus the validity of these results were obviously being compromised. This also goes along with her court testimonies as well. Since no one was there to validate her results, the testimonies weren't properly validated either, which obviously led to her lying under oath. This is in section 7.7.1, subsection F through G, or F through I, really, where it needs to be properly validated. The replicate tests or calibrations using same or different methods by her coworkers, retesting or recalibration, the correlation of the results, and the review of reported results. Just all of this obviously wasn't being checked either by Annie Dookhan's coworkers or even her superiors or her supervisors, and just all around bad. Non-conforming work. When Annie Dookhan's coworkers started noticing how much more testing she was able to get done, they brought it up to her supervisor, who first did an internal audit on Dookhan where they failed to find anything worthwhile at the time of the audit. But if they look at how many tests Dookhan was processing versus any of the other analysts, it was so much higher than anyone else's level of work that anyone of sound mind, even not in the lab, would see that something was off or wrong. The supervisors of the Hinton lab refused to see anything that was wrong until it was too late, but Annie Dookhan was definitely operating in a level of non-conforming work that went on too long without being dealt with. So section 7.10.1 goes into non-conforming work and how it needs to be dealt with. Subsection C is an evaluation is made of the significance of the non-conforming work, including the impact analysis on previous results, a decision on taking the acceptability of non-conforming work, and where necessary, a customer is notified and work was recalled. So when the audit was done and they didn't see anything wrong, but they could clearly still see that Annie Dookhan's throughput was so much higher. Like they didn't they didn't see that this was a problem. They just saw that she was getting this work done. It seemed to be relatively accurate, and she had the experience to back it up, and they just refused to see any of this as non-conforming. But her coworkers, even after multiple times of going to their superiors, she was obviously not conforming, and they didn't see it or they refused to see it as that, and they didn't do anything about it. Lastly, the control of data and information management. At the Hinton lab where Annie Dookhan worked, there were numerous times where the system the lab was using was not being checked properly for their data and information management, or even the records that needed to be kept. Annie Dookhan was able to forge her coworkers' signatures to get into evidence lockers while also using fake evidence keys. I mean, this is something that should have been handled way sooner. Both of these points in 7.11, the laboratory should have access to the data and information, and the laboratory information management systems using the collection, processing, recording, reporting, storage, retrieval of data shall be validated for functionality. So the fact that she had a fake evidence key or some kind of other way to get into evidence lockers that she had no business being in, just as a failure of data and information management all around in the lab's part of it. The conclusion is, at the end of the day, the Annie Dookhan lab scandal has made an impact on the forensic science community as a whole and really affected forensic governance to its core. There were so many systemic problems that came into the foreground while the investigation was happening in the Hinton lab where Annie Dookhan worked for so many years. Forensic governance literally is the system that sets the rules, policies, and processes that are put into place for a reason. Forensic science is the bridge between science and the judicial system, and the results that come from labs most of the time make or break cases that can and will put people into jail. The simple fact that Annie Dookhan went against these rules and the lab turned a blind eye to the problems that were arising put the whole forensic science system at risk. There are these strict policies and processes set for a reason. When those processes are abused, it makes the whole system look bad. Annie Dookhan's mistakes resulted in over 21,000 cases being either overturned or dismissed because nothing she touched could be trusted to be accurate in its entirety. The aftermath of Annie Dookhan's mistakes during her time working in the lab turned into a huge waste of time and resources to go back through all of her cases again, and we all know how precious time and resources are to the government forensic labs. The moral of the story of Annie Dookhan really is that forensic governance is incredibly important to maintain because without proper regulation, bad things can happen at any time. Here are my references. Thank you so much.